Hello. So let's learn together a bit more about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, ADD. You'll hear it go by a few different names, and just depending on the specific child's diagnosis, the description or the title may change. Again, also with education, acronyms change or can be adapted occasionally. So you may over time hear this going by slightly different letters. So let's learn together a bit more about what it is. Strategic research-based best practices for intervention and strategies that help in the classroom for everyone to be more successful and have a more positive experience. And also working with families, which is a huge component and an essential and important component, working with your students' families to, again, work collaboratively to ensure success for your student in and out of the classroom in the long term, as well as in the short term in your classroom. So essentially, we're going to cover these main overarching ideas, defining a bit more clearly what is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. Again, typical interventions and strategies that have been proven successful in research and in practice. And again, working with families of children with the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. From our text and from individuals in society that live daily with ADHD and have experienced the good, bad, and ugly of living with this particular diagnosis and who've been successful, and through experience, we can learn a great deal. Additionally, research informs our practice and provides data-driven and information, research-driven responses and intervention strategies to being successful in the classroom, reaching these students, and for these students themselves to grow in their ability to learn to regulate and be successful as they take ownership of their academic experience as they proceed through throughout the course of their academic career. In our text, primary text that I use is the Including Students with Special Needs by Friend and Bursuck, and I refer to that often in this presentation with a few other resources to help us better understand ADHD and similar diagnoses. In a nutshell, ADHD is not really about inattention. Rather, it's about the inability or the difficulty with regulating that attention. Sometimes it's also described as a student isn't inattentive, they're attending to everything, and being able to pick out those things in the classroom or in the conversation that are the items they need to be focusing on can be a struggle. Stephen Tonti, he as a college student with a successful college student with an ADHD diagnosis, and he explains himself as attention different, not deficit. So look at my resources or my sources at the end of his presentation. I would encourage you to check out his presentation. It's a short video, 5 minutes or so, where he explains from his perspective, his experience with ADHD. It's very enlightening. The highlights of the diagnosis, the definition, chronic and serious inattentiveness. It can be present with hyperactivity and or impulsivity. It's more severe. It occurs more frequently than in peers. And it's essential to understand that these symptoms for a diagnosis, symptoms that need to be seen across two or more settings, not just in one particular setting, like perhaps only seen in one classroom, but across the spectrum of classrooms and or at home and other settings. And they interfere with academic or social functioning. So there are three types. ADHD, predominantly inattentive, which doesn't present with as much of the hyperactivity, movement, motion. It's more kind of it looks like a student is daydreaming, and they are. They can frequently lose things, just kind of inattentive to details. But again, there's not the excessive fidgeting or squirming that you might see with the second type, predominantly hyperactive, impulsive type. You're absolutely going to see more impulsive behaviors, physically moving much more than classmates or typical peers, the leap before looking, the act before thinking type of behaviors. And then you can have a combined type where you'll have behaviors from both categories. Difficulty in focusing that attention, especially when it's topics outside of their particular areas of interest, and difficulty sitting still. Sit still. It's the common refrain that you may be tempted or find yourself saying frequently when you've got a student who is on the second or third type there of ADHD diagnosis. So what can we do to help these students be successful? We will look at behavioral interventions, how we can work with parents, a bit more information about medication, academic interventions, and environmental supports. Behaviorally, it's essential that we emphasize the structure, simple, straight, clear instructions and expectations, rewards. Yes, you'll have to give reprimands and corrective statements at times, but they need to be mild and used less often. You really can harness the power of students' interest if they have a hyper focus or hyper interest, particularly in a particular subject area or content or interest topic. You can use that to help piggyback on their intrinsic motivation to focus on the task at hand in order to reap the reward of getting to engage in their more preferred area of study or topic or interest. So important to consider their intrinsic, how to target more the intrinsic motivation, because those external rewards, you can have diminishing returns with that, especially when they're overutilized. So parent education, to collaborate, to communicate consistently, all very essential to your success and for your students' success in and out of the classroom. You want to develop, a good relationship with parents, with families, to collaborate, to provide consistent responses to behaviors at both school and home. Because that can really help increase your effectiveness of the other interventions that are overlapping. For a more holistic or a response, strategies that really target from a lot of different directions for increased effectiveness. Medication, there's a lot to know, particularly if you're like myself, not super familiar with the medical side of this. There's a lot of information out there and different types of medications that target different things in the brain, different chemical and brain chemistry. But essentially, they are often stimulants. Medication, for about 70 or so or more % of students, properly dosaged medicine can be a really effective treatment. It's the most common strategy that's used currently, at least as of the printing of our text, or basically within 2020. And it really can help it's the most common intervention, as according to our text, demonstrated by research to have significant benefit, again, at proper dosage, which is a moving target with kids that are, growing throughout, especially those elementary, middle school, adolescent years. So it's a decision. It's essential to realize and be aware of that it's a decision that's made between families and their physician. Educators should not, and they may not tell or otherwise suggest to parents that a child needs medication. It can be controversial because there's a spectrum of beliefs and understandings about medication, its benefits, its usages, its dosages, its benefits, and things like that. So it's something that each family needs to make that decision for themselves. And we collaborate and are supportive according to their decisions, and still just deliver the other strategies in tandem or apart from medication. So again, that's something that we have probably the least control over or effect on. And but to be aware of those medications is important, especially if students in your class who are on those medications. We, as teachers, as educators, professional educators, serve an important role on reporting back to families if they notice a change in students' behavior that may be due to a student skipping a dosage or getting off the dosage, or perhaps suddenly or over gradually seeming like they're less and less attentive, or maybe more and more disengaged, because it's possible that their medication dose needs to be adjusted. And so that's information that can be helpful for the physician and the family to know what you're observing in the classroom. And so that information is important to report to them, like lethargy, because that can negatively affect the student's academic learning. So because we don't want the cognitive ability to come to be affected by an overdosage or whatever. So when we report back to them, that really informs their ability to make decisions. As far as medication goes, academic interventions, it's important, short, sweet, to the point. Really emphasize the essentials. Provide a lot of opportunities for engagement and participation, manipulatives that provide a hands-on experience, and it can increase focus for these students, for all students. This is a beneficial thing to do, so it's a win-win. Remember to preview, repeat, summarize, review, tell them what you're going to do. Tell them what you're doing while you're doing it, and then review what you did. Repeating yourself, again, that can serve all students' comprehension and engagement well. So again, a win-win with those sorts of common practices and effective practices in the classroom. For example, if you have a reading passage, breaking that up and chunking it into smaller sections and frequently checking for comprehension and for understanding at shorter intervals. Math, for example, suggested that you allow more time for computation, because their attention span can affect their ability to focus in on working a math problem or something similar. So giving more time allows them time to, if they lose focus, to come back to it and power through. Advanced organizers can be really effective, again, for all learners, but particularly for students that need help with their organization skills, to preview the lesson and provide an outline of the day's schedule, and just really help them with expectations and focus. List needed materials when you're beginning a lesson. Remind students these are the things we need for this lesson. So lots of structure, consistency, opportunities for participation, checking for that understanding, following up, and providing advance warning or heads up for transitions. Again, serves all students well, provides structure, and is a good practice in general. Environmental supports that can be really helpful, or being aware of the environment, the noises, the distractions, all the different sensory inputs, smell, sound, visual, and trying to create a classroom environment that really supports focus and attention, and is not distracting to the extent that's possible. And that includes all the different senses, lighting, all that sort of thing. Working with your special education professionals in your building for tips on sensory adjustments, things you can do in your classroom can be a good practice for all students, again, but particularly students who suffer with distractions and noises and things like that. Simply moving the student closer to the teacher or away from things that are distracting them, like noise and smells, allowing them to stand while they're working, or wobble chairs and different things that promote their ability to move, whilst and increase their ability to engage in the learning activities. Just really looking for creatively looking for opportunities to meet their sensory needs and being aware of their sensitivities. Again, for all students, particularly though students who struggle with attention issues. So, and in closing, or finally, I should say, a brief discussion of the families of children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder diagnoses. It's important to be sensitive to the families. In particular, it can be especially stressful and complicated for families, especially when they're having that new diagnosis. So it's essential that our communication is a key to success for the student primarily, and for the parent and schools. Just being aware of particularly terminology that's familiar to, like, internally friendly, but maybe confusing initially to families as they navigate this diagnosis. So just being aware of the emotions and just the experience of families that are especially new to the diagnosis as they navigate the education system, and helping walk them through that, asking questions and providing opportunities for them to engage and ask questions and inform them, connecting them with making them aware of different support groups perhaps that are available, and just being a source of information and support for them, and being on the same, approaching this from the same side of the table as a team. So I hope this helps inform your practice as we serve these students.